Welcome back, AUDL fans, to the latest edition of the AUDL Take. This past weekend was supposed to be opening weekend for AUDL 2020, but I've got a really special treat for you this week. Before I jump into that, let's talk about some of the things that the AUDL is doing to keep us entertained. If you've checked or kept up with AUDL over the past couple weeks, they have been doing the AUDL Rewind every Thursday night, 8 p.m. Eastern. They're doing a little throwback of some of the best AUDL games ever on Facebook. You can watch with all the other players and players from that game. Also, AUDL this past weekend had a lot of games aired on Facebook and on certain teams' social media accounts, just trying to keep people engaged with the league. But moving on from that, I have something very special for you, something we've never done before in the AUDL Take, but we have an interview segment for you. This week, we have John Boezi, co-owner and GM of the Atlanta Hustle. He's going to be talking about the Atlanta Hustle and the tryouts and some new team members, and as well as talking about the delayed season of the AUDL this year. He's going to give us some background information of how Atlanta is handling it and how the league is handling it as well. So very excited to bring this segment to you. I hope you enjoy it. Here it is, the interview with John Boezi. We have with us John Boezi, GM and co-owner of the Atlanta Hustle. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Tucker. I'm really excited about what you're doing here with this and want to support it and see it grow.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for being the guinea pig. This will be my first one, so we'll see how it goes. But let's just kind of jump right into it then. So we had the tryouts in January for Atlanta Hustle, and we had pretty big turnout. Who were you really impressed with? How did you like the tryouts? Give me kind of insight on how everything went.
Yeah, tryouts were great. Every year, it's always the signal of the beginning of the season, and it starts to get real for the returners. And then you have all these new people who are bringing all this great enthusiasm and energy that really gets infused into the team, and it starts to take off from there. I'll say I was impressed with a couple of the returners coming back in great shape and really serious. Josh Turner really looked good for early in the season. He's somebody who is very cognizant of his body and tries to load manage. And I thought he looked really sharp early in the season. That was great. Matt Smith was coming back from injury, so he wasn't able to participate. But otherwise, our core guys were really looking pretty good this year, which is great. And then we have a few people new from veterans from other teams that were coming in. Jakeem Polk was somebody we got to see for the first time on the field at tryouts. We've been talking with him. He'd been around the city and whatnot, and I thought he played really well and integrated really well with the team. So we were excited to see that be a good fit. And then Michael Fairley kind of returning to action, getting back in with the group. He's a very dynamic player, so it was good to have him out there. And then Tyler Kunsa, who previously played for the Cannons, has come up to Atlanta, and so it's been good to integrate him as well. And then lastly, getting some guys who are injured back. Parker Bray, who's a huge talent, getting him on the field. He's still working his way back from injury and getting used to playing Ultimate again. He's been playing a lot of disc golf, and he's been slow playing it, but I think we're going to get to see a bunch of him as soon as we get to start playing again. And then also JP Burns, who also had an ACL injury and honestly looks like he got better from his time off. He was on a nice ascension curve, and he looks like he kept it going. He's a amazing defender, and his offensive game is really looking polished.
So with kind of the delayed season going on right now, I've read Miranda Knowles is doing a lot of film work with a lot of the players to keep them kind of up to date with what's going on. What are you hearing from some of the players that they're doing to kind of stay in shape?
Yeah, everybody's doing a little bit of something different. Everybody's in a different situation, whether they're shelter in place or they're somewhere where they can kind of go outside and throw with people. And also, I think a big factor is how you're handling it emotionally. A lot of players need that certainty of a season and a game schedule to kind of push themselves beyond what they're comfortable doing. So some players are, I think, going, trying to dig deep to find that. Other players, it's a little bit easier for them. Some people were more process related or just sticking with their normal routine and adapting it. Other players are maybe, playing more video games and watching Netflix. So that's definitely one of our challenges, trying to keep everybody moving forward.
That's a big thing though, like you said, the emotional aspect of it too, trying to keep yourself, just with it and not kind of lose your mind slowly from this is something that a lot of people just really aren't used to.
So yeah, I
Yeah,
think
we
that's
had our
something.
first virtual practice, and one of the sections of that practice was just to check in with people about how they were like handling, because there can be a lot of anxiety about just the world's
Mhm.
problems right now, and just like making sure that we as a team keep our bonds together, like making sure that like the people know that we're also a support group, we're friends, we're like the only way we're going to really do well as a team is if we trust each other, and make sure that like us as guys can talk about that and like kind of share the load.
Yeah, I think that's important. So that kind of leads me into the next thing. We're talking about the AUDL 2020 season. This was a big one really for everybody involved. And I kind of want to know what your insights are as far as, do you think we're going to have a full season, or is it looking like the shorter? What kind of do you know, and what can you share with us?
Yeah, I can tell you it's been a crazy time. Like as people know, it moves so fast, and like we were considering scenarios one day, and then everything shifted and you have to consider new scenarios, and then all of a sudden we were postponed. Um, the league has been really consistent about their desire to want to play games this summer. And so I got to believe that they're doing everything they can to make that happen for the public. So we are telling the team that we are planning to play games this year, whether it's May, June, July, whatever, that's up to the league. And for the public too, to decide when they feel comfortable kind of going out and attending things. So we're definitely going to kind of read and react to all that. But I'm optimistic that we're going to get to see some AUDL this year, and it'll be interesting to see how that works out. I also think that the public right now is pretty open-minded. So like we don't necessarily have to play an 8, 10, 12 game schedule. There's some like interesting creative solutions that I think people would rally behind and get, be entertained by.
Right. I mean, I've seen things like tournament style, or just doing double headers to shorten the season.
Yeah.
There's all that kind of stuff. It's very interesting. And I mean, I've heard from other podcasts as well, players are pretty, they want to play Ultimate. I mean, they understand the risks involved, and we want to be as safe as possible, but these players love Ultimate, and they're going to take an opportunity if they can to play.
Yeah, so we have an obligation to make sure that we're leading them against their like impulses if they're not
Right.
like in their best interests. But I think people vary based on what their perceived level of threat is. If you're in a place where you're like shelter in place and it's scary, maybe you're not looking forward to that. And if you're in a place where it really hasn't hit yet, maybe you're like, oh yeah, we could do this. Let's go out and throw. Let's play mini. And we all have different situations we have to handle. And that's one of the things with this is that every city, every team is really dealing with a slightly different situation. So although the league is trying to guide us all, they have to really understand everyone's situation. And so the owners at each level have to kind of manage it themselves.
And, you're general manager of Atlanta Hustle, also co-owner. In those kind of positions, when you're worrying about your team and your players, what kind of challenges are you going through as a general manager, as an owner, with this season kind of being delayed?
Yeah, it's a tough situation. I think the biggest problem really is the uncertainty. We had known information, we could plan, right? We could figure out what the best path forward is and with our resources and make that happen. But right now we don't know when we'll play. We also don't know like when we get the green light, how much time we'll have before the first game. Do I have 1, 2, 5 practices? And then you can't really make a plan for that. So you have to make many plans, or you just try to go forward. And when you have the green light, make the best, decisions then. Now, like also, do all teams have an equal amount of preparation time, right? Maybe we can start practicing before New York. And if that's the case, we're going to be at a slight advantage to them, right? Because every year is a new team, and so teams that have more returners have an advantage. They can kind of build their chemistry faster, but really every year you have to build chemistry. People may be playing different roles than they did last year, or maybe people are gone and you're trying to figure out different ways of doing things. And so we can work on our individual skills, we can work on our strategies, but until we get on the field and build that chemistry, it's tough.
Well, and kind of speaking as someone who's like a season ticket holder like me, and a lot of people that I know who come to these games, I think a lot of us are always very much supportive of our teams, even beyond just being able to be there in the games. So this kind of day-to-day thing, I've got season tickets. There's people I'd like to come to the games. Where do you see this going as far as how I kind of word this? Like, if the season kind of prolongs, are you thinking about, you have to go through refunds? Like, what is the back end of like, doing fields? Like, what is your biggest worries in that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, from a business perspective, we are actually like, it's not as bad as it may seem because there's not a lot of sunk costs. Like our burn rate
Okay.
isn't that high. So, it's not like we're in any danger as a business. It's more, yeah, refunds on season tickets. How is that handled? Really, we might look to some of the more established pro leagues for policies and kind of sticking with that stuff. Another thing that's really big for us is camp. Our camp is scheduled
Right.
in June, so we're really trying to make that happen. And there's a lot of resources tied up in that. And we are looking at doing maybe a virtual version of camp, distance learning type thing, and then having maybe a later week where we can do it physically. So I think if we can run camp and we can have some games this year, we're going to be doing just fine.
Well, that's good to hear too, because it's in the back of my mind, I've been kind of worried our team's going to, shutter. The teams themselves going to fold because of something like this. We've never had a season just completely get suspended. So it's good to hear though that it really, like you said, a lot of these teams too. It's not just the game day that they get a lot of their resources. There's other things that they're involved in.
Yeah, we're fortunate that like St. Pius, our field, and many other field sites are understanding of the situation, and they're not just going to take your check for the year and hold on to it if they can't let you have games because of their school policies. So being able to get that money back really is good for sustainability.
Well, that's awesome. That's good to hear. And that's pretty much all I got for you. I want to thank you for coming in and talking with us. I think a lot of people who are big AUDL fans, me especially, want to know as much as we can so that we can stay involved with the league and see what's going on. Oop, me. And but I think too, the AUDL is doing the Rewind series. I think that's really a good way to keep people engaged. And so I think right now, for the most part, just keep people interested, like you're doing with the Atlanta Hustle, releasing videos. Just keep people engaged right now. So hopefully, good news comes around the corner.
Yeah, I'm actually curious since you're such a super fan. Have you talked about the different scenarios that you would find interesting? Like if we did like a one playoff game every weekend for over a couple of weeks, and it was like a single elimination bracket or tournament plays, or do you want to see a season, like a shortened season happen? If we were showcase games or exhibition games, what is appealing to you?
So I talked about this in a couple episodes ago. I think the best case scenario to be, in my sense, the most realistic is if we did do a full season, it would have to be a doubleheader thing. I think that'd be a lot of big toll on the players themselves, especially with travel.
Mm-hmm.
So that worries me a little bit. I don't want to, right after all this anxiety of being inside, now we're going to travel and make you play doubleheaders every weekend. I think that'd be a lot on the players. As a fan, that'd be great because you're getting a full season. But I would not be too upset. I think it'd be really creative if we're down to just 1 month and we have to do a tournament style where you basically have everybody in the division come and play in one area. This would have to be in the cases area where we can actually be close to each other again and things like that. But you basically just do it like we did in the old days, 8 games in a weekend. You do some kind of pool play and bracket, and then whoever the top 2 teams are, they play an actual AUDL timed kind of game. And that's who goes into championship weekend. I think that would be a creative way to do it, and it's the best with the limited amount of time. But yeah.
And what's your tolerance level for an unbalanced schedule? If say a team in an area can't travel to play their opponents because a border is closed, or their opponents in a place they can't play, so you end up playing regionally against the teams you can play, and maybe the South plays more games than the East and so forth. Is that something as a fan that would bother you when eventually one team makes the playoffs and another doesn't?
So I think for me, it's just having an AUDL season is the most important. I want to see AUDL. I want to see the top players playing against each other, these top teams competing. I think you get into the scary part is like, how is this going to look in a historical context? So let's say the teams get through and they win the AUDL championship based on the way we did things. Is that going to mean they have like an asterisk next to it? Is that going to be like, okay, they won, they were the champions, but this was during the scary, pandemic kind of thing that was going on. So that would be my only worry. I think putting on something is more important than the historical context of it, but that's where I get a little worried is like, well, is the team going to feel like they were truly champions because they won in this kind of fashion? I think as a fan, I'll go for it. Let's do it. But historically, that'll be where I think you're going to have more of an issue.
Well, I'm looking forward to having that debate.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for coming in and doing my first interview. I think it went really well. I'm glad you came on, and I'm hoping that we can get this season started.
Great. Thanks, Tucker. Stay safe.
You too.
Well, that's going to wrap up this episode. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the interview. I'm going to be planning on having a lot more interviews with other coaches and players, even announcers, anybody I can really get my hands on. It was my first time ever performing one of these interviews, so I plan to make those interviews better as we go along. But thanks again for tuning in, and I will see you all next week on the AUDL Take.